Hello, it's Alpha here and we are back on the Pioneer server. Today let's take a look at Dionel because he is going to be the next hero to have his Supreme Plus ability upgraded. Dionel is one of the first Celestial Hypogean heroes in AFK Journey, so most of you probably already know how he works, at least kind of. And because of that we are not going to go through all of his abilities, but I will talk about one of his abilities called Nectar Feast, because his Supreme Plus ability upgrade is related to this ability. So Nectar Feast has an passive and active part, and the active part of this ability is that Dionel will drink some nectar, and this will give him attack damage and attack speed buff. And one kind of important thing to understand about this ability is that when a fight starts, Dionel will usually use this ability as the first ability in the fight. So that means that before Dionel can actually start attacking enemies, he will do the active part of this ability. And if you look at this clip here, you can see that he does the active part of this ability at the start of the fight. And as a result, it does take him quite a while before he can start attacking enemies. At least to me, it kind of looks like he will start attacking enemies after 5 seconds in the battle has already gone. So yeah, that was the active part of the ability. Then this ability also has a passive part, and it's kind of important to also understand how the passive works. And the passive part says that each non-permanent stat boost from different ally increases Dionel's damage and attack speed by 15%. So in this sense, Dionel is kind of similar to Lily May and Perseus, for example, that he wants buffs from allied heroes, and then each of those buffs from different heroes will increase his damage output. And there is a maximum number of 3 buffs that he can get, so you ideally want to have 3 different allies giving him a buff so that he gets the maximum benefit from this ability. Okay, so now that we understand how the Nectar Feast ability works, we can talk about the Supreme Plus upgrade of Dionel. And it reads that when Dionel uses the Nectar Feast ability, he can drink the nectar 50% faster. And also after he's done drinking, he gains a shield that is 60% of his health. So here you can see with the Supreme Plus ability upgraded that Dionel drinks the nectar faster. And he starts attacking a little bit faster, and he also gains a shield at the start of the fight. Previously he started attacking around when 5 seconds has gone, and now it looks to me like he starts attacking after like 3 or 4 seconds, which doesn't like exactly match to the description of the skill that said like 50%. I would imagine that he starts attacking slightly faster, but it's still faster than it was previously. And on top of that, he gains the shield at the start of the fight. The Supreme Plus ability also has this last line of text that says that when Dionel has the maximum 3 buffs from different allied heroes, he also gains 25 execution stat. And execution is a stat that increases damage done to enemies that are on low health or something like that. So basically it increases Dionel's damage to some extent. And now you might be wondering, does this actually change anything in terms of how good Dionel is in PvP? And I would say that on its own, this upgrade doesn't change that much about Dionel. But to better understand how viable Dionel is, let's take a look at some of his weaknesses, because previously he hasn't been that popular when it comes to PvP. So I would say that Dionel kind of has 4 weaknesses. First one is that he is slow to get started. So as we saw from the clip, right now on the live servers, it takes him like 5 seconds before he can actually do anything. And that 5 seconds is definitely too long because some fights can be over in like 8 seconds. So that doesn't really give him enough time to do anything. Now with this Supreme Plus ability, he can act a little bit faster, so maybe like 1.5 seconds faster like we saw. So that can help his viability a little bit. The second weakness that Dionel has is that he is quite squishy, and once again, this Supreme Plus ability gives him a shield at the start of the fight, so this can help a little bit with his survivability. So both of these changes are good for him, of course. Now the shield alone doesn't really help him survive something like Athalia that well, but we'll get back to that a little bit later. The next weakness that Dionel has is that he kind of needs the 3 buffs from different allied heroes before he can work properly. Obviously he can do like a decent amount of damage even without the 3 buffs, but for him to like really get the full potential, he needs the buffs from 3 different sources. And we didn't really like fully explain this as to why he needs the different buffs. Like 2 of the skill descriptions mentioned that he will get extra attack and execution stacks once he has the different buffs from allied heroes. But there is also another ability in his kit that says that whenever he gets the maximum of 3 buffs from allied heroes, he will do this area damage attack that hits all of the enemies and does a lot of damage to enemies. So basically you want to get him to 3 buffs, then he will get the attack bonus, and then he will do this big AoE damage to enemies. So a big part of his damage comes from getting the full stacks and then using this second ability that does a lot of damage to all enemies. And previously this was kind of an issue because there were not that many heroes that could give him the buffs. So the most common ones were Damien, Laika, Hugin and Scarlita, for example. And you kind of needed to use at least 2 of these. Then the third buff could come from Artifact. But then there is also the issue that if you do it that way and the enemy team has Siren, Siren will disable the artifact. So that's why you kind of needed to use 3 of these heroes to guarantee that you will get the 3 buffs from Dionel. But the issue here is obviously that these heroes are not that great in terms of like PvP performance. They're kind of like in the middle of the pack. So you would have to run like pretty much full team of like these middle performance heroes to kind of like enable Dionel. And also these heroes are quite squishy, like Laika and Damien doesn't really provide any tankiness to the team. So that also adds into the issue that Dionel is a squishy hero and you don't really have like good frontline in the team if you are running some of these heroes. But now, recently, there has been multiple heroes added to the game that also can give buffs to Dionel. So for example, now we have Ravion, we have Perseus, we have Sandrock, we have Pang, we have Pandora and Damon, for example. So the situation with getting these 3 buffs to Dionel is a lot better than what it used to be. And then the last weakness that Dionel has is that he doesn't do that well against stall heroes. So when we're talking about stall heroes, we're talking about these hard to kill heroes like Saida, Igor and Athalia, for example. So let's say that, for example, your Dionel team is able to kill the enemy Athalia. It doesn't really matter that much because Athalia can just keep on fighting even after death, and then at some point she will just kill Dionel because this team doesn't like have a good way to protect against Athalia. I mean, realistically, there are not that many good ways to protect against Athalia, but it was not only like Athalia related issue, there was also like the fact that if you are using something like Laika and Dionel and Damien or whatever, those heroes can't really kill Igor either. So then if the enemy used something like Satrana, Bonnie and Igor, then you didn't really have a good way to kill that team either. And I would say that this is still the biggest issue that Dionel has. This part hasn't really changed. All of the previous other parts has changed a little bit with the fact that they are new heroes and they also make the team more tanky, etc. And now he's slightly faster. But this issue is still true that Dionel doesn't do that well against heroes like Saida, Igor, etc. But maybe this can be slightly better now because we have the new heroes like Perseus. So Perseus can work in Dionel's team pretty well because he can also be like a secondary carry hero in that team. So maybe with the help of like Perseus and Dionel, you can actually end up like killing the enemy Igor, for example. Or I guess you could use something like Aliceth. So Aliceth is able to kill Igor sometimes as well. And also, like we mentioned earlier, one of the issues that Dionel has is that something like Athalia can snipe him quite easily. So there is some help with that with heroes like Ravion and Aliceth, because Ravion and Aliceth also give Dionel one time like death protection, so at least he can dodge one ultimate from Athalia with the help of something like Ravion. Okay, so keeping all that in mind, these are the 3 teams that I tested and came up with for Dionel. So 2 of the top teams are for Supreme Arena, and then the bottom team is for regular arena. Yeah, so this is the Lightbearer version of the team. The idea is that we use the Pact Bond artifact to make Dionel tankier. So with the Pact Bond artifact, you can share the damage between your team. So if one of the heroes takes a lot of damage, it doesn't matter as much because it gets distributed to all of your other heroes. So that means that if the enemy has something like Athalia and Athalia ultimates your Dionel, usually your Dionel doesn't actually end up dying because the damage will be shared between the other heroes. But also for that reason we have Ravion, so that even Ravion's death protection can save Dionel once. And then we need 3 buffs for Dionel, and we get one of the buffs from Hugin, we get second buff from Ravion, and we get third buff from Perseus. So that means that we get the full 3 buffs. And then we just have Siren here to activate the Lightbearer faction bonus, and also because the Pact Bond artifact, for example, is really powerful, we have Siren in this team to disable the enemies from using the Pact Bond artifact for some time, so that we can hopefully burst down the enemy team before the artifact actually comes active.
It's time to deal you in.
Yeah, and then there is the Mauler version of the team. It has very similar basic idea. Once again, we are using the Pact Bond spell for similar reasons, and then we are also using Perseus as a secondary carry. But then we just get additional buffs from other Mauler heroes. So we have Sandrock giving buffs, we have Mikola giving buffs, and we have Gerda giving buffs. I would say that Dionel is probably not the most necessary hero in this team, so you could do this team without using Dionel and using some other hero, but he kind of fits into the team because he also, like we mentioned, he can do like a decent amount of damage, and he wants buffs from allied heroes, so you can use him here as well. And then the last team is for regular arena, and this is pretty much kind of like same to the Mauler team, except that we can't really use Gerda here because Gerda can't give the buffs on normal arena side of things without charms. So we have, for that reason, we have Ravion, and just to give like some crowd control protection and some damage protections. And also we have Mehira here crowd controlling the enemies at the start of the fight. So we have more time for Dionel to drink the buff at the start of the fight and then start dealing damage to enemies.
Fall in! Fall in! Run through everything! Fall in!
Yeah, so quick summary. It seems that Dionel actually is pretty good now with the combination of the Supreme Plus ability upgrade and the fact that we have some of these new heroes that can support him quite well. That being said, I don't think that this is enough of a reason for most players to pull him. Of course, if you have Dionel already, then maybe you want to try some of these teams that I showed earlier. But I don't think he's like as flexible as something like Athalia is, for example. And you also still need quite specific heroes to combo with him. So something like Perseus and Ravion, etc. are quite important for the team, I would say. So there is also one additional trick that you can do with Dionel that I kind of discovered when I was testing some of these teams. Now, I'm not sure that this trick is actually that good, but it is kind of funny. Like we talked earlier, usually what happens is that Dionel will start the fight by drinking the nectar buff, but you can make it so that instead of drinking the buff, he will cast his Mythic Plus ability, which is the big AoE damage to whole enemy team, and usually this means that after just 2 seconds into the fight, all of the enemy team has lost like 50% of their health. So it looks something like this. So yeah, you can achieve this in a situation where Dionel gets all of the 3 buffs right when the battle starts. So you have to have them instantly active on Dionel when the battle starts, and then instead of drinking the nectar, he actually casts this ability first, and then he does the nectar drinking. I'm not sure that there are many heroes that can actually do it. The only ones are Hugin and Perseus, because they give their buffs instantly, and then you need the last buff from Artifact. So then that way you have 3 buffs right when the battle starts. Now obviously this doesn't work if the enemy has Siren, for example, because Siren will disable the artifact and then you don't have the buffs instantly. Now there is one other way that you can do this, but I can't be bothered to explain it because I don't actually think that this combo is necessarily that good, because you can't usually kill the enemy heroes right away with this combo, and then it doesn't like matter if you do it instantly or if you do it like a little bit later on in the fight usually. So I would rather use some of the other teams that I showed earlier in this video than do this trick, but it can be quite funny because I guess maybe if you are like have a lot more paragons than your opponent, for example, or something like the enemy team is like super squishy, you could technically maybe win the fight in like 2 seconds.